Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Stasek with the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance. I'm a past president, and I would like to welcome you to tonight's event on our first Thursday of the month of May. As they say, may the 4th be with you, if you have a lisp. Anyway, tonight's event is called Florida Women. Are you angry yet? And we have a panel of 3 wonderful speakers that are going to be talking about the importance of these issues, the right to live free from violence and discrimination, to receive the highest attainable standard of medical and mental health services, to be educated, to vote, and to earn an equal wage. We're going to be learning about the Equal Rights Amendment this evening. Again, a very, very important topics. The right to bodily autonomy, and some of the things that have been happening, especially in our state House, our state Senate, that are so infuriating. It's so hard to explain, and we're all going to be talking about this and what people can do. At the end, we always like to have an action item or action items for you, the guest, to do. We actually ask our panelists to give us some action items. So I'm going to ask them to think about that during our program, an action item or 2 that we can give to our guests, to our members, so that they can actually do something. Now, our event tonight, of course, is coming to you live on Zoom and will be available later on YouTube, on our Spacecoast Progressive Alliance YouTube channel. At the beginning of our program, we have a few little bits of business to take care of. We'll be opening the floor to anybody that has a community announcement. We'll do our panel, and then for basically the last half of the meeting, the floor is open to our guests and our members to ask questions and to have a good discussion about these issues. So it's about time to get us going, and I know several people have been joining as I've been speaking. So again, I would like to welcome everyone to tonight's Space Coast Progressive Alliance first Thursday event. We are so glad that you're here. I would first like to turn the microphone over to the current Space Coast Progressive Alliance president, Karen Houston. Karen, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Phil. Thank you so very much. And I want to say thank you to this awesome lineup of powerful women this evening. These women work hard every day to level the playing fields in our state capitol and all over. So I want to say thank you to all of you for being here tonight and sharing your insight on what's happening around. And I want to say thank you to Vicki and Poco and our wonderful Action Projects Committee. They're the ones that put this thing together every month. It's a lot of work, but we get together, and Vicki is one of the hard workers. And thank you so much, Vicki, for putting this together, and along with the Action Projects Committee. We prefer to say APC because it's a big mouthful when you say Action Projects Committee. Our next event will be Policing the Police, and we already started on a wonderful lineup with that event coming up November 1st. June 1st. So hope you all will be able to join us on that, and come on back at anytime, every first Thursday of the month. And you can always check our website out. If you missed something, if you didn't have a chance to get on, it's scpaflorida.com, and that's SCPA Florida spelled out, SCPAFLORIDA.com. Check it out. You'll see some insightful news. You'll see things from in the past. I just have to say this briefly. As a native Floridian, I'm not just angry, I'm disappointed, I'm frustrated, and I'm tired. Every year we have so much stuff we have to go through and it's just so much. And so I'm just tired. And so I'm hoping that the ladies here, you pay attention to whatever they have to say to you. But first I'm gonna throw it off to our Carol Becker, our treasurer, and she'll talk to you a little bit about the membership and contributions. Carol, I know I saw Carol. You're still muted, Carol.
Yeah, it wouldn't let me unmute myself, sorry. Yes, you can go on Facebook, or is one way to join. It's $35 for family, $25 for an individual membership, $10 for student. And you can go through Facebook to do that, or you can just write a check and send it to Space Coast Progressive Alliance, P.O. Box 412, Melbourne 32940. That's a yearly membership. It's not required, but we sure do appreciate it because it helps us with our expenses to have these meetings. Did I forget anything, Karen?
Actually, Carol, thank you very much. I also want to put a quick pitch in. We have some Space Coast Progressive Alliance T-shirts available, and they haven't quite yet figured out exactly how this is going to work. But the plan would be to offer the Space Coast Progressive Alliance T-shirts to those that contribute a certain amount. This is kind of like your national public radio or a public broadcasting pitch that says, "Hey, if you can pitch in, here's your T-shirts or your mug." We don't have a mug, but we do have wonderful T-shirts actually that we'll be offering. So keep an eye out for that as we make those T-shirts available for those that want to contribute to the SCPA. Back to you, Karen.
Thank you, Phil. And I would like for all you to understand that every event that we have, we ask our panelists to please recommend an action item. And so we're asking all of our panelists tonight, please recommend an action item and for you to act on those items. It's no good if we just take this information and go nowhere with it. Tell your family, tell your friends, tell everybody. So look forward to the program. Thank you all for being here tonight, and back to you, Phil.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for your service as our president. We really appreciate your leadership and your hard work. I know that this session up in Tallahassee has been frustrating and very hard, and you've been right up there representing all of us. So thank you for that. This is our chance for those in the audience who might have a community announcement to please raise your hand. And the way we raise our hand in the Zoom effect, and it depends on whether you're on a phone or iPad or on a laptop. But down at the bottom, you should have a little button here in the Zoom app that says reactions. If you click on that, there's a little thing that says raise hand. And if you raise your hand, you'll become visible to us and you can make your announcement. Again, this is for the good of our community, and we certainly appreciate those of you that are leaders in our community. And we have our first community announcement, Suzanne Taylor. Suzanne, you have the floor. If we can get you unmuted. I see we're still muted, and I think we'll need to get you unmuted. There we go. Suzanne, you have the floor.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Hi, thanks, Phil. Hi, everyone. I'm the president of the local Space Coast League of Women Voters, and we have a meeting coming up that I wanted to tell you about. Our guest speaker is Adam Tritt. He's going to talk about the foundation451.org group that he started, which deals with banned book issues. And the meeting is Thursday, May 11th at 5 o'clock at the Iron Oak Post in Melbourne. And I'm going to put the address and that information in the chat. Thank you very much for letting me announce it.
You're very welcome, Suzanne. And again, we thank our League of Women Voters for being a very important part of our community and a very important part of our alliance of active organizations speaking up and defending our democracy. If you're not a member of the League of Women Voters, I would certainly encourage people to consider that. Suzanne, what is the best way? Again, your website is? Uh-oh, looks like we got you muted again. I'm sorry. Let's see if we can get you unmuted.
There we go.
There we go.
Yes, I'm going to put the website in the chat, but if you Google, the easiest way is just to Google League of Women Voters Space Coast, and we pop up right away. But the address is lwvsc.clubexpress.com. As I said, I'll put it in the chat. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And if anybody has any other community announcements, again, go to reactions, raise your hand. We'll be able to spot you and to get your announcement put out there for our community, our alliance. I don't see anybody else that has their hand raised.
Oh, Lily has her hand
Lily does.
raised.
And Lily, do you have an announcement for our community?
Yes. Hello, my name is Lily. I work with a nonprofit organization. Oops, sorry.
We can hear you. There you go.
It's a little high. Hello, my name is Lily. I work with a nonprofit organization called Complementary Contraception. We support individual family planning goals. Our demographics is low-income individuals. If someone is having issues paying for long-term contraception care, like the pills, the patch, the ring, IUD, we are here to help. And our website is complementarycontraception.org.
ORG, got it. Lily, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that information. And if you would, please, if you have access to the chat, if you could enter that into the chat for people as well so that they can visually go to it. Of course, it's a neat feature of Zoom where we can have a... okay, in which case we don't have that. And I'll tell you what, if we could all write that down, apparently we don't have access to chat for her. But Lily, if you could just say that one more time for us.
It's complementarycontraception.org, one word. And I can send a message to Patty Farley, but
I'm just curious I don't know. To understand what a proposal means in this, because
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Right? I don't know that the board
we're getting somebody's cross chat here, and let's just get everybody muted and we'll get rid of that problem. Thank you very much, Lily. We've got you. And if you do send that to Patty, we'll make sure that that gets distributed.
I sent it to Patty. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Anybody else that has a community message? Doesn't look like we do. I would like to once again remind everybody that you are here with our first Thursday event from the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance called Florida Women, Are You Angry Yet? We have three wonderful speakers tonight. Our first will be Dr. Leandra Preston. She's a senior lecturer of women and gender studies at the University of Central Florida. Tiffany Hughes, she's the 25th president of the Orange County, Florida NAACP, and I believe she's also the current president of the League of Women Voters of Orange County. And then Patty Farley. She's the Southern Regional Lead on the ERA with the National Federation of Democratic Women. The ERA, of course, is the Equal Rights Amendment, something that many people are very curious about, would like to get the latest news and update. Patty is just the person to talk to about that. And I guess to put this in the proper framing, I don't think ever before in my lifetime, I'm 63 years old, and I don't think I have ever seen a time when women's rights were as much at threat and more than threat, women's rights being taken away as they are now. The Dobbs decision, essentially taking away a woman's control over her own body autonomy and reproductive rights, is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before, and hopefully that will eventually be corrected. But that's only one of many things that are happening. We know that across our nation, state legislatures are taking steps to take away rights and to impose their philosophical beliefs on women in ways that are shocking and unacceptable. And our three panelists tonight are going to be examining that to understand what's happening and what we can do about it. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Dr. Leandra Preston, Senior Lecturer of Women and Gender Studies at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Preston, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for spending time talking about these, obviously important issues. I know that if you are here, you're involved and you're already engaged, but there's been so much happening that we can't keep up with it all. So I think it's really important to continue to have these conversations and to help people understand the gravity of what's going on and the implications really of this for the long term, regardless of what happens to this governor, if he goes off to pursue his other goals and dreams, but this legislation and the impacts of this legislation will remain. And even when we overturn legislation, there is still a lot of residual effects. And I will talk about that a little bit today, but I would like to start by talking about the education legislation. So there's been so much legislation, but what I have been working on specifically as a professor and a professor of women's and gender studies particularly, but also as an activist a feminist activist, LGBTQ activist. All of these things and all of these individuals and groups are being targeted simultaneously. And, it's a really sustained attack, and it's been happening so rapidly, and it's been hard to keep up with. I have kind of joked that if I realized I was going to be going through this now, I would have relaxed a little when I was fighting about COVID policies. I'm also a senator in the United Faculty of Florida, our union, which is also being targeted, all of the unions. So I want to talk about a few of these issues. Some of the legislation, I would like to spend a little bit of time just kind of going through the education-related legislation, especially higher education, because it has such a tremendous impact on our state, on our nation. Higher education is a place where we've always had academic freedom. We've had the ability to encourage intellectual inquiry and disagreement, and just really engaging people in critical thinking and teaching people how to think critically, which is so important. And the legislation makes it very clear that one thing that's being targeted is critical thinking. We don't want people to think critically. It is clear that higher education is a threat to the governor and to the Republicans who are really legislating against what we've always been able to do in higher education. So I've been at UCF for 20 years. I was an English professor, but I've been in women's and gender studies most of my career. I have seen it evolve and change and grow. We were the women's studies program, and then over time we became women's and gender studies program. I teach some theories of masculinity courses. I teach various classes. Actually, I teach quite a few because we're only 2 people in our program. So we've always been marginalized in the university, but we have been able to do what we are there to do, basically, which is involve students from across disciplines in critical inquiry, critical thinking, to put the pieces together. So I know a lot of the folks in Brevard from my work as a domestic violence activist, and I have always been interested in, how constructions of gender contributed to these types of things in our society, domestic violence. And so that's kind of how I have ended up already in the community in Brevard. And then, of course, it's been helpful to be able to bring the UCF, voice out here. I know that we have, a lot of faculty out here, but of course, most of us are in Orlando. So it's been a nice bridge between Brevard and, Orlando and UCF, because there's so much exemplary work and research and education and invention, and just so many incredible things are happening at UCF and at many of our state universities that is absolutely distressing to see it undermine the way it has been, to see higher education, all lumped into this, like we're just, popping out progressive babies, and which, I don't think that's all bad, but that's not what's happening. If you go to different departments and the university, you'll see there is a diversity of political affiliation. There is a diversity of everything, really. There's a lot of diversity in the university. So for the last probably 10 to 15 years that I have been at UCF, they have really, until recently, diversity, DEI was the language. That was what we were supposed to do. That was what we were encouraged to do. There was funding for it, and it was great for women's and gender studies because this is what we do. And we, were able to really globalize what we were doing and expand our course offerings and really focus on this, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives per the university. So it's been really frustrating, to say the least, to see the language, the the way that they talk about this changed to where now it's, you know, this dirty word. It's something we're literally banned from doing now. So I wanted to, it's so overwhelming. I have been talking to a lot of journalists. Pretty much any opportunity I get, I will talk about this because it's so important. And so many people don't realize the gravity of what's going on in Tallahassee and how it's going to impact us for, you know, permanently in a lot of ways. But, and, you know, we're talking about the education legislation, and then there's the anti-abortion, anti-immigration, anti-trans legislation, which I want to go through just kind of really quickly. Some of these bills that have passed and are waiting for the governor's signature and will inevitably be signed by the governor. But also about the way that the universities are being hijacked by the governor in the way that they have distributed power and redistributed power to where the majority of the decision-making is now per this Senate Bill 266, which was the affiliate bill with House Bill 999, which started much worse than it is now, but it's still absolutely horrific in the way that the language is broad, in the way that it allows all of the hiring and decision-making to be with the president and the board of governors who are appointed by the governor. So, but what has been happening now is, and I'm sure many of you, if not all of you know, have heard about what's been going on in New College, but this is what we are concerned about happening at all the universities. And we're seeing evidence of this with the presidents that have been hired at some of the universities. So we have New College, you know, DeSantis decided this was going to be his target. He was going to create, you know, turn this into this conservative university, this conservative college. And he fired every single person on their board of governors and appointed, and then fired the president of the university or of New College and appointed, you know, a former politician. And that's what's happening at other universities as well. Now, thankfully, UCF, we had our president, we've had a new president for, you know, he's fairly new. So I think that he may be in the pocket enough that we're not going to end up with one of these, you know, just pure politicians. But this started before this legislation started happening, when our president of UCF appointed the provost. And that's very atypical. We've never had such a high administrative position, or really any position, they're not generally appointed. They weren't anyway. We had you know, all these faculty would get involved. There'd be a search committee, and there was a rigorous process that people would go through to become candidates. So now the provost was appointed by the president, and that was that. And this has been happening more with more and more positions that they're being appointed. So what has happened over time is, through different legislation, DeSantis has enabled and shifted the decision-making from the faculty to the board of governors and the president and the administrative body that he's essentially appointing and deciding, you know, determining without any input from faculty. So when he pushed through this recent higher education reform, which includes House Bill 999, which is now Senate Bill 266, he had already created a circumstance that was going to enable this to succeed, because there had already been enough changing that there was not going to be any faculty involvement. There was not going to be any, you know, we could dissent and protest, but we don't have any power essentially when it comes to these things. So we did have more power, but so our only real, as far as my experience and what I felt is that the only real ally is our union, that we have the United Faculty of Florida Union, which is very active. We've been working very hard for since I've been involved. We've been working very hard for a long time on, the COVID issues, but then of course it folded right into this. So we are now at threat of being decertified because another bill that passed was the union busting bill. And that just passed. And that targets all public entities except police officers, firefighters, I believe. There's these few entities that are traditionally pro, Republican supportive that are not being targeted. They are okay, but we have to have, educators unions have to have 60% of the employees pay as dues paying members. UCF's had like 35%. We need 60. So if we don't get 60%, we're going to be decertified and we will not have a union to bargain for us. We're not going to have a contract. Essentially, we're going to have whatever UCF determines us to have, and which is essentially what DeSantis is going to determine us to have, because that's who, the board is the arm. I mean, it's a direct connection to, DeSantis and his demands. But so we have, I wanted to say that I've been teaching an introduction to women's studies class, an intro to gender studies class, and some other classes this semester. But in my intro to women's studies class, because the week we were doing intersectionality as a topic was the same day we were meeting was the day that the higher education reform went out, and they were essentially starting this conversation about banning intersectionality. And so it was a great opportunity for me to engage the students in dialogue about what's at stake, right? Why are they targeting this? Why are they targeting, gender? Because at the time of the language of the bill was targeting, any education about gender or race. And it was just so broad. It's really really outrageous. And it still is outrageous, but it has been modified enough that we feel like, women's and gender studies might be safe. We can still talk about gender, but there were so many other things that they were trying to prevent us from talking about, such as critical race theory, intersectionality, and things that are absolutely essential to what I teach. I mean, there's no way I can teach a women's and gender studies class and not teach intersectionality, because that's the primary lens we use to teach our gender issues through. So in so many ways, it was really rendering us unable to do what we do in the way it stood. The problem is now, even though it's been modified, it's so broad that there is a lot of room for, misapplication. What else we've seen since the Stop Woke Act was overturned by the judge, found it unconstitutional, which is what we suspect will happen with all of, a lot of these other bills. But people, it didn't matter to, a lot of people were already self-censoring. A lot of people were already not teaching certain texts. We're not proposing courses. We're not hiring people. Even if we were hiring people, I don't know who's coming to, Florida to teach gender studies right now. So there are a lot of things that we don't even know what the implications, how far reaching, because we don't really know the classes that are not going to get proposed, the people that are not going to be hired. And the self-censorship has been clear. I mean, it's evident. A lot of faculty is afraid. They're afraid to teach something that's going to get them into trouble. A lot of people have been quitting, not specifically from UCF, but I know, you may see in the news these stories about so-and-so quitting because this class got canceled. And it's just been a really distressing climate for education and I know for faculty, just speaking personally, and not even people teaching what I teach, because I know I'm probably going to be one of the first people to go, what are they going to cut first? Of course, women's and gender studies. Now I feel more confident that won't happen, but we don't have the same kind of freedom and security that we felt we had prior to this legislation. So in addition to the higher education reform, quote unquote, well, what I was able to do, I wanted to finish actually able to do with my students was, it's a Zoom class. We meet just like we're meeting now. And I was able to pull up the higher education reform, and I had them go line by line with me. We went through it together to discuss what this was about. And it was really, I think it was really enlightening to a lot of them who have never really looked at legislation. Maybe some of them, they didn't realize that it was somebody just makes a bill and then, this is how things become law. So I was able to integrate a lot of what we were teaching or we were going through, and directly connect it to the course content. And it felt a little risky, to be having these very specific conversations about the legislation that's telling me not to talk about these things. But same with, talking to journalists and reporters. My colleague, who is now the interim director, is not putting herself out there because she's taking care of the administration, and our immediate administration has been supportive, although the larger administration has been silent. But I'm the voice, I'm the mouthpiece, because neither of us have tenure. We don't even have a tenure track. But that's also being attacked now. There's been a lot of other action around post tenure reviews and things that are really function to destabilize professors and faculty, and let us know that we are not safe. And so the way I've seen it is, I don't feel that I have much to lose at this point, in the sense of, if all this legislation continues to pass and there is, nothing to stop it, then, I'm not going to be able to do what I'm doing anyway. This is not going to be sustainable for me to try to teach women's and gender studies without being able to talk about things like critical race theory. And gender. And even though they have removed that from that specific language, if you look at some of the language of the bill, and this is the one that I'm talking most specifically about, is Senate Bill 266, which it bans the DEI funding, the diversity, equity, and initiative. Any program that utilizes that kind of funding, no, we're not giving you that funding. The language says that you may not distort significant historical events, or include a curriculum that teaches identity politics, or is based on the theories that systemic racism, sexism, oppression, and privilege are inherent in the institutions of the United States. They also implement a couple different centers and programs that specifically teach principles from, the Declaration of Independence, from the Federalist Papers. And specifically, one of the versions of the bill required that we only teach from the Western canon. Now that was modified. It's just this, it's so outrageous. So I have so many things I still want to talk about. So I want to talk about how all these things are really essentially connected, because all of the higher education reform, all of the higher education legislation, all of the attacking of higher education, and the undermining of K through 12 education. But it's an attack on an attack on the students. It's an attack on the kids. It's an attack on LGBTQ students, because some of the other legislation that's coming out is targeting that, students and teachers, they cannot communicate about these things. We're not allowed to have these conversations. But now it's going so far as some of the other anti-trans legislation has included, they will prohibit children, under 18 from taking puberty blockers. And these are kids who may have been on puberty blockers for, the majority of their puberty when they start, because it causes such distress. And this is medical treatment that they need. And the legislation has essentially banned access to that. And if caretakers are found to be providing this, I mean, they can be arrested. It's just really draconian. It is. And then so along with the 6-week abortion ban, which is, we know, essentially a full abortion ban, you know, these are all attacks on, it's all about control. You know, we're going to control education. We're going to control we're going to control the pronouns that transgender people can use. Like literally the legislation says that they are banning pronouns that don't align with the sex you were assigned at birth. So, I mean, there's just the problematics are, I can't talk about it in such a short time. And I'm grateful that we have other people talking about some of the other issues that are happening simultaneously, because this is so dense, the amount of legislation and the amount of the attacks, especially on transgender communities and including children, and of course on people who can become pregnant. There's really this concerted effort to increase the control that the legislation is, exerting over the people. I mean, and I feel like we all know this, but so I've been engaging the students very directly, and I've been talking to as many journalists who want to talk to me. I'm involved in an organization called the Scholar Strategy Network. And what that functions to, it connects experts in the field and professors and things to media to help counter disinformation, to help ensure that there are qualified opinions and information going out to media to counter the disinformation, because a lot of this, of course, is based on disinformation. There's the propaganda that's implying that the schools are turning our kids transgender from the, early age, that they're essentially, if a child wants to be a cat, they will put a litter box out. And, my sister was asking me about that. I said, that is propaganda. It's radical propaganda, implying it, making people think there's such a horrible problem that they have to implement these laws to challenge it. But let me see, how much time do I have? I think I'm about out of time.
It is indeed time for closing, but we'll have more time for you.
Yes,
in the
I appreciate
Q&A.
that. And I would love to, after this, share, I have, many links I've been collecting as resources for the students that I was putting together, that you kind of see the deterioration, how the situation has deteriorated for education over time, and, simultaneously, of course, for other individuals such as transgender and women. So I look forward to having Q&A, and I mean, there's just so much to talk about that there's no way that I could have crammed it into 20 minutes, but I'm so grateful for you just listening to what I've had to share so far. And, for those of you that know all about this, I extra appreciate it. And for those that don't, I'm more than happy to talk about any of this more after this event. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Preston. I'll tell you what, all of us in this Zoom room are with you. You are not alone. And we understand that you literally have a target on your back. This governor, who is clearly running for president, and he is manipulating the legislature. He's got the legislature under his thumb, and they're doing this clearly as a political maneuver. But in doing so, they're attacking our academic structure. They're attacking people like you, and attacking our children, attacking our students. I think attacking not just every woman in the state, but I think all of us. They're threatening all of our rights to speak freely. The censorship of our thoughts, the censorship of our schools, it is phenomenal, outrageous, and it is like the title of our program, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. But we want to say that we are with you. Everybody in this room would be clapping right now, giving you a round of applause because you represent us and you're standing up and fighting the good fight for us. And we're looking forward to having you more active in the Q&A. By the way, we've gotten word that there's a good chance that we will be able to have Representative Anna Escamani join us near the end of our program. And she can give us the latest update from Tallahassee. As a rational person up in Tallahassee, she's a very, very good person to hear from. So thank you again. Thank you for bringing these things up, and thank you for what you do at UCF. So
I do want to say that Anna Escamani was one of my students in several of my classes. She is, just absolutely incredible. And me and my colleagues, along with everybody across the state and women's and gender studies at all the state universities and colleges, have been collaborating with Anna Escamani right there with us, just trying to work through all of this for months. So, I mean, it's really incredible to have someone like that representing us in the House. And may we have more people like that in the future.
And so another reason for us to say thank you to you for helping train Anna, who is a brilliant young woman. She and her sister, they are just amazing, amazing people. Anyway, let us move on. Thank you again, Dr. Preston. I know that you've got something else you need to do in the short term.
But I'll be right back. I'm only going to be gone for a few minutes because I really want to hear everybody else talk as well. So
very good. Thank you. Thank you, Doc. And our next speaker is, first of all, let me, for those who have just joined us, I'm Phil Stasek. I'm the host of this evening's First Thursday event, which is called Florida Women, Are You Angry Yet? This is our monthly program from the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance. And we have three wonderful speakers with us tonight. You just heard Dr. Leandra Preston, Senior Lecturer of Women and Gender Studies at the University of Central Florida. Our next speaker will be Tiffany Hughes. She is the president of the League of Women Voters of Orange County, also the 25th president of the Orange County, Florida NAACP. Our closing speaker for this evening will be Patty Farley. She's the Southern Regional Lead on the ERA and the National Federation of Democratic Women. So our next speaker, Tiffany Hughes. Ma'am, again, thank you so much for being here this evening to give us your perspective on these important issues. Tiffany, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Phil, and good evening, everyone. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Vicki, and anyone in the Space Coast Progressive Alliance who coordinated this event this evening. And Dr. Preston, as people are listening to this call, it made me want to take one of your classes. So thank you for educating our young folks, our young professionals, our seasoned professionals, just for educating all of us in spaces like these and certainly in our classrooms. Before I even begin, I want to touch on something Karen said earlier, and maybe a little bit to the title of this event, Are We Angry Yet? And I challenge everyone on this call to not just get angry, but to get activated, right? It is not enough to sit in your chair and feel away and say, I don't feel like I can do something in this moment, because there is something that you can do in this moment. The fights are plentiful. And with just one day left in the legislative session, I think all that we are going to see, we have seen, and all that will be signed will go to the governor's desk. But that does not mean that we stop. There's no such thing as an off year. There's no such thing as elections don't happen right now. Elections have consequences. And so I like to say we get what we get and we don't get upset, but there is something we can do about it. So again, Tiffany Hughes, I served as the 25th president of our Orange County NAACP, and I currently serve as president of our League of Women Voters, Orange County. And I really just wanted to start with a little bit about me and how I got into this work, what's happening right now, and how we can get activated. I actually ran for the House of Representatives last election cycle in District 39. And what really drew me to this work, really just community investment, and particularly around reproductive healthcare. If you've ever heard my story, I have a 3-year-old son. I talk about him all the time. His name is Legacy. And a year before I had Legacy, I had fibroid surgery. Very common in my family, a very small framed person. but I had 10 fibroids, one as big as a grapefruit. And so that made pregnancy before and certainly thereafter very complicated. And a year after that, getting pregnant with Legacy meant that I had some very hard and interesting conversations, both with my doctor and my high-risk doctor and my husband, my family, about what it meant to be pregnant and where do I go? What decisions do we want to be made on my behalf if we walk into a situation that's less than ideal? And so I'm thankful. I thank God that Legacy's here and I'm healthy and I get to raise him. And I like to say that I have a 3-nager now who tells me all about what he wants to wear and what he doesn't want to wear. But that makes reproductive health care very personal for me. It is not just the taking away of a pregnant person's bodily autonomy. It is taking away the choice for a family to make the decisions that are going to be best for that family. And again, really getting into that work before running for office through my work with the NAACP, and I now serve on both the local board and the state board of Ruthless, which is an organization dedicated to electing pro-choice women. But I say all that to say, when we talk about what can we do as a community to get activated in this moment, it is joining your local league. It is joining your local party affiliation. It is making sure that you show up to the polls and not just showing up to the polls by yourself, but making sure that you take somebody with you. It is making sure that you are getting activated with whatever local organization speaks to you, such as the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance, to make sure that you are educating yourself, you are educating the people around you, and therefore getting activated to do something in this moment. I was listening to State Attorney Worrell recently, and she said, what are we going to do in this moment? Not where are we going to sit and what are we going to say, but what are we going to do in this moment to get activated? I go back to reproductive health care. Leader Driscoll often says she wants to create a Florida that is healthy, prosperous, and safe. And if I'm honest, I don't feel as though I'm in a place that is uplifting me to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. Certainly not for my reproductive health or for my child. When we think about birthing, we know that African-American women are 3 to 4 times more likely to pass away during childbearing, or at least, or up to a year after they have delivered their child. And so when I think about this 6-week abortion ban that has now been signed into law, that affects women at every stage of life, at every socioeconomic situation, in the best of circumstances or in the worst of circumstances, we are hindering a pregnant person's ability to be healthy, to be prosperous, to be safe in the place that we love, in the state that we love, in the state that we live. And I take that even a step further as we think about our children. For those of us who have, not only did we see a 6-week abortion ban fly through the House, but we then saw a permitless carry bill fly through the House. One that, you know, if we are talking about protecting our children, I was reading an article recently that said that we have had more mass shootings than we have had days in the year. That gun violence is the number one killer I don't know another way to say that, of young children than anything else. It is the number one reason that our babies are dying is gun violence. As a mama, that's heartbreaking. That's not a community. That is not a state that is helping me be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And so I find strength in, that's my son. I find strength in knowing that I'm in a fight to move my state forward in a way that is going to be healthy, prosperous, and safe, not just for me, but for the next generation of students, our next generation of babies, because they will be leading us faster than we know it. They will be the person in rooms. They will be in this room. They will be leading the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance before we know it. And we have to create space for them. We have to create an environment where they thrive. We have to create a Florida, a world where we are keeping them safe, that we are keeping them here, that we are keeping them alive. And that's a really scary place to be, but it is a place that requires us to get activated. It requires for us to go up to our school board meetings. It requires us to go to Tallahassee. It requires us to call our legislators. It requires us to call our senators. It requires us to call Rick Scott and Mark Rubio and said, stop it, right? We are not talking about Joe Schmo. We are talking about our families. We are talking about our neighbors. We are talking about our babies. And so I continue to get engaged in this work. I continue to make sure that we are moving people to the ballot box, that we are moving our community to the ballot box, that we are continuing to uplift not just reproductive health. I'm a strong believer that a woman's reproductive decisions should be made between that woman, that pregnant person, her families, her doctor, and their faith, and not politicians in Tallahassee. That's not your business. I don't want a politician with me in my doctor's office. That's not quite the place for you. And I encourage everyone to make sure that we are staying educated. League of Women Voters, for instance, has Vote 411, where you are able to find out what the positions, what the positions are of a candidate, if they have answered or the questions to the league's questionnaire. You are able to find out what is on your ballot. I don't know about Spacecoast, but City of Orlando has an election coming up in November. We had 3 elections a few months ago. Duval County has an election coming up. 2024 is going to be a big year. And so don't let up. Don't take your foot off the gas. Don't feel as though this moment is helpless or hopeless, because it's not. And you can do something. You can get activated in this. It is on all of us to get activated in this moment.
I hear the sound of our next generation coming up. This is fantastic. What is that, a little boy, a little girl? What do we have?
Little boy, my 3-nager.
Yeah. The 3, I heard that part indeed. Well, thank you very much. And we don't want to cut you short. You still have more time if you wish to take it. But we do, by the way, to answer your question, we do have several elections coming up here in 2023 in Brevard County. Most of them are local elections, and I believe in Cocoa, Rockledge, maybe a couple that I'm missing here, but there definitely are opportunities for people to have their voices heard. Get out, get your neighbors registered to vote. For those that think that they may be registered to vote by mail, I would like to remind everyone that's in this meeting that the legislature, the state legislature, took away the renewal of that. And if you thought that you had been registered, go to the Supervisor of Elections website very quickly and make sure, because unless you have reapplied this year, in other words, within the past 4 months, you are no longer registered to vote by mail, and that's across the state. So many of us are knocking on doors and begging people, please vote by mail. Please, if you're not registered, please register, get your voice heard. It seems that every election that comes by, when we have fewer and fewer people showing up to vote, it's frustrating and angering. Tiffany, did I step on you, or do you have more to conclude with?
No, I do have more to conclude with, but
you got the floor. Back to you, ma'am.
That was a great segue into elections, because again, we have every 2 years we turn over our legislators, and every 4 years our senators, our state senators. So make sure that you are reaching out to your SEO, your supervisor of elections, because everyone who had a vote by mail ballot, it is now null and void, and you will have to reapply for that ballot. But I wanted to kind of circle up to education, and Dr. Preston really hit the nail on the head with the way in which we are destabilizing our education system and truly starting from the bottom up. When I really thought about my conversation today, it started with reproductive health care and the children that are birthed into this world, and how gun violence has shaped their experience. And then we send them to school, and the way that which our current legislature has attacked our public education system, when we know that that is the great equalizer. I am a product of Florida public schools, both on my lower grades, and then I went to Florida International University in Miami. And the quickest way to keep a community impoverished is certainly to take away their access to high quality education, not just education. It is not enough to say that, yes, you went to school, but did you get a quality education? We like to say that we once had a system of separate but equal, and the reality was that it was not equal. It was separate, but it was not equal, and it created a system of the haves and have-nots. And that's really what I see and what I think about when we start to move money out of our public education system, when we move dollars into a system that is allowed to cherry pick the students that can go to those schools, that can cherry pick how those students are educated, that gets to cherry pick the information that they are taught. I saw a recent article about a book that was revamped. I believe it was a math book, actually. And the quote read something to the effect of, Rosa Parks was asked to move out of her seat because she was African American. And they rewrote it to say, Rosa Parks was asked to move out of her seat, period. If we don't tell our story in its fullness, right, in its full representation, in making sure that everyone feels that they are seen and represented in our story, then we are certainly doomed to repeat a history that, though ugly, we have come out of in some ways. We have progressed, and we certainly don't want to create a system where we are regressing in our educational advancements and our educational abilities. Dr. Preston pressed on the fact that we're seeing self-censorship, that we may see our teachers at every level deciding not to teach. Right? What does that mean for our students? What does that mean for our babies? What does that mean for our next generation of leaders? And so I certainly leave you with this. I would say I'm a praying woman. And a scripture that I like a lot says, let us not be weary in well-doing. Let us not get tired of doing what is right. Over and over and over and over again. So don't get angry. Well, do get angry, but more importantly, get activated. Do something. Find your niche, find your space, find your group, and take it to the ballot box. Knock on doors, make those phone calls, send those emails, send those text messages, but get activated, because we are the change that we've been waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. Again, the room would be standing up and giving you a round of applause. And we really, really appreciate, frankly, your inspiration, your activation, your motivation, your ability to get people up and doing something. Because as we have said over and over again, the SCPA firmly believes that it's one thing to be educated, to be informed about topics, but if we end the program and nobody does anything, then we have completely failed. We've lost, and there's no point in us being here. Our point is to get people to go and take action. So thank you very much. I'm going to ask you to kind of keep thinking about what kind of an action item you'd like us to leave our audience with as we end the program. Our next speaker is Patty Farley, a friend of our Spacecoast Progressive Alliance and well known across Brevard County for many, many years. She's been very active in a wide range of things, not only here in Brevard, but statewide, representing women's issues and so much more. She currently is the Southern Regional Lead on the ERA with the National Federation of Democratic Women. And Patty, again, I want to alert you that it is possible that we'll have Anna Escamani coming down again. It's completely uncertain when and if she'll be able to join us tonight, but if she does, we'll have to jump to her and then we'll come back to you. But Patty Farley, again, a great friend of the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance. Patty, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you. With the things I'm going to say tonight, I hope that it makes you a little bit more angry. Okay, I'm going to be throwing a lot of just simple facts at you at first here. A lot of people, well, most people, 96% of the people in the United States think that people should be equal. And up until the Dobbs decision and Hobby Lobby and a few of these things, 76% of the people thought that the Constitution made us equal, and they were just wrong. Right across the front of the Supreme Court building are the words, big as all get out, equal justice under the law. But that is not what we have as women, and that is not what we have as for gender. And if we had this passed years ago when many of us worked for it and thought it, a lot of people thought we had it and thought it was passed, we wouldn't be having to deal with a lot of the crap that we're dealing with today. Frankly, we wouldn't be having to deal with fighting for our reproductive rights. We wouldn't be having to deal with our wage discrimination, and we wouldn't have to deal with all the things that's happened to our gay LGBTQ community. Okay, so that's just the way it is. So I want to talk to you about where we stand with the ERA. There's a group of us that never stopped working on it. And we've tried to get this passed, and with changes that's happened in recent years, and if time permits, I'm going to go into a few of those, we have brought the issue to the forefront again through begging and pleading and trying to get this through. Originally, we got, in 1972, we got 35 states to vote for the Equal Rights Amendment. Okay, you have to have 38 states to approve it. We ran into a situation where Congress arbitrarily put a time limit on it, and a time limit on an amendment is not necessarily has to be recognized. We proved that with the last amendment that was adopted. The Madison Amendment, written by James Madison, it took over 200 years to get it adopted. And with a lot of people are saying, well, some states rescinded the Equal Rights Amendment. The 14th Amendment was rescinded by some states, and the Supreme Court said that was not allowed. So rescission is not acceptable. We had 35 states approve it. Then we had Illinois ratify, Nevada ratify, and just a couple of years ago, Virginia ratified the ERA. Now, this big push came from the idea that Justice Scalia, who was Mr. Conservative, stated in one of his decisions very publicly, and made it was a big thing, that, and his statement was such that he said, you don't have to discriminate against women. That's exactly the way he said it. But there is nothing in the Constitution to keep you from it. So there was nothing in the Constitution. They did not recognize anything in the Constitution to protect women. So at that point, there was a big push to get the ERA again. So we got 38 states to ratify it. That should have been enough to get it published. The archivist, under the directions of Donald Trump, refused to publish it as part of the Constitution. And then it got into a big legal thing that we're fighting right now as to where it stands. Can you be accepted because it's past the date? Conservatives are using the date, which was arbitrary, to say it's not legal. Well, anyhow, we managed to get a vote for the first time in 50 years on the floor of the Senate to pass ERA. That happened April the 27th. We were hopeful. We did not get the votes necessary. We got 52 votes. It was 52 to 47, and Feinstein wasn't there. All the Democrats and Murkowski and Collins voted for it. Okay. And it has to have 60, though, the way they've got the rules now. So it's not considered filibustered. It's not an old-fashioned filibuster where you stand up and talk yourself to death. It just goes by vote for cloture. And they didn't get the 60 votes. At that point, in a maneuver to try to keep the bill active, Schumer switched his vote to be a no vote because as a no vote, he could bring it up for a vote again this session. So it was a political maneuver, but it did go down. So every Republican other than Murkowski and Collins voted against having equal rights for women in the United States. Okay. So that's where we are on that. It's shameful. I couldn't believe that the vote would be that way. And some of them acted very negative on the floor about the vote. And now we're gathering up letters asking these people to justify their vote. And they're being very snippy in the letters that they send back to us about how it wasn't constitutional, that we should have known better than to bring this up for a vote and whatever. But it's embarrassing. It has been 50 years since this is voted on. Okay. Now we are really pushing it. Alice Paul brought forth and got the right to vote in 1920. She wrote the Equal Rights Amendment in 1923. Okay. 100 years we've been begging for equality in this country. Can you believe that for 100 years, women have had to beg for equality? Even before that, we've been trying to get equality since the writing of the Declaration of Independence. But we actually got an amendment that was brought forth on the floor once a year, every year in Congress until 1972. When we got 35, it passed and we got 35 states. Now we have the necessary 38 states and we are still being stopped. Now, to go back and talk for a few minutes about what stopped it in 1972. In 1972, we had a woman named Phyllis Schlafly. If you're my age, you might remember that name, okay? She actually, what people don't know is she was very political, and it was not time for women to be political. She wanted to be in the next Republican president's cabinet, and she guaranteed Reagan that if she could get him elected, maybe he would put her in his cabinet. So her plan was to stop the Democrats on the abortion issue. Up until then, you saw pictures of Betty Ford with Bella Abzug, with Lady Bird Johnson, and Rosalind Carter. They would all appear together in support of equal rights for women. They would bring their children with them, and it was a big thing to get equal rights for women passed. But Phyllis Schlafly steps in with the political idea of trying to get Reagan elected. And the next thing you know, all you're hearing everywhere is that people will have to use bathrooms together, and your daughter will be drafted and sent to Vietnam. Okay? Now, look at today. There are unisex bathrooms, family bathrooms. Women, if they hadn't been soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, we probably wouldn't be in the positions that we are today. So she held our country back on issues that were really non-issues. And today, what is the issue that is bubbling up? Bubble. When they had the Senate hearings this last month on ERA, the main issue that came up from the people, other than saying, oh, this is illegal, you can't do it, was there will be trans people playing sports with your daughter. Okay, so it was the trans issue is going to be the big bigaboo that they're going to throw at people and make you scared of trans people. Now they might use the same bathroom, they might do this, they might do that, and they will play sports with your child, and it won't be fair. To keep more than half, we make up more than half of the population, but to keep over half of the population and the entire trans community, which is not a very big community. I mean, everybody deserves equal rights, but frankly, I think they said the number of trans students trying to get into sports when I would watch that hearing was like 37 in the entire state or something. But to keep an entire population from having equality, when they come up with these issues that they just have to come up with something to try to hold people down. And that's what they're doing with the issue right now. That will be the issue pushed, trans in sports, to try to keep this from going through, because they have to come up with an excuse. The excuse will be that it's not legal, but we have 38 states and we have the approval. Now, the states that did not ratify originally was the solid South. And I do believe there's big arguments as to why those states didn't. The main top employer in the states that didn't ratify was Walmart. Okay? Walmart, I can't say this for sure, but Walmart policies does not pay men and women the same. The wage discrepancy, right now in a recent Pew research study, let me throw some of that at you before I don't know what my time is. The discrepancy in wages, back when I started yelling at the Capitol steps, give me my whole damn dollar, was that women made 79 cents to a dollar. It's come up to 82 cents now, and that is not because we've come up 3 cents. It's because the whole world has come up with inflation. It's basically the same discrepancy, And this Pew report said that it will be over before we reach at the current rate wage parity. It will be another half century. A half century. Now let's talk about just wage, what this is going to do. A beginning salary discrepancy is usually about $6,000 between men and women. And a lot of places they don't want you to discuss your salary. They even have rules against it. But just if your salary is $1,000 difference over the course of a working career, most people retire after working 30 to 40 years. If you start working in your 20s, you retire in your late 60s or whatever these days, 40 years. And if it's a discrepancy of just that much money, say 11 cents on the dollar, that is going to mount up to over $1,000 a year. Over the course of a career, that's $300,000 to $400,000. Most people, that would make a difference in your lifestyle. $300,000 to $400,000 makes a difference in what house you buy, the cars you own, whether your children have enough money to go to college, how you can do childcare. This is a major income difference. And if you throw in the discrepancy of something called the pink tax, which we yell about also, some people know what the pink tax is. It's the difference in cost for women's products and men's products. That's exactly the same product. The difference between a pink razor and a blue razor, or a pink bicycle that's got sprinkles on it, or a camouflage bicycle. They estimate that one of the biggest difference you run into is the cost of soaps, shampoos, and dry cleaning. My mother bought a suit this last week, and to get the sleeves of the suit hemmed and the dress hemmed, it cost her $65. If she had walked into a Men's Warehouse, they wouldn't have charged anything to hem the sleeves of the suit or the pants. So it's about $1,300 to $1,500 a year on that. And that's going to be a big discrepancy in your overall lifetime wages. Between reproduction, healthcare, there's a lot of reasons. I'm looking at my time here. There's so many things that would change. Our lives would be better and change. The way we were looked at in the law, we would not be just tossed aside. We would have strict scrutiny classifications to govern discrimination. We would have wages the same. A war on women, and I do maintain that one does exist, along with the wage discrimination. And an example of that, the way we're looked at differently, if you go back, I do remember that, I think Dr. Preston mentioned it, the number of women killed domestic violence in the United States each day amounts to, I had numbers on it. I'm seeing if I can find some of the numbers. Far more than what we had killed in the 12-year period in the war in Afghanistan. But you never heard about that. You never hear about these things. There was a football player that was guilty of domestic abuse, and he finally went down over abusing his dogs, but he was seen beating his wife several times. But he that wasn't the issue that brought him down. And I have to mention this before I completely run out of time. The United States, under Jimmy Carter signed an agreement with the United Nations that is known as CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. He signed this in 1980, and it agreed to stop discriminating against women. Our Senate would never ratify this treaty. It has never been ratified to this day, and we are among some really strange people. There's only 7 countries in the world that haven't ratified this treaty: Nauru, Palau, Tonga, Iran, Sudan, and Somalia, and the United States. This is our company. Most of them are places that they have on Survivor or something, but this is the company we keep. The respect that we have in the world over the way we treat our women, the way we treat our citizenry, is shameful. And we have to do better. We have to get ourselves guaranteed in the Constitution. That is the only thing that's going to happen, because the courts, which shows us now that we cannot trust the court system. Okay? They can overrule any statute that they want. The only thing that they can't overrule and take away from us would be a statement in the Constitution that guarantees our equality on the basis of gender. And let me end with reading what it says. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And that needs to be in our Constitution, people. Let me end with that. And I've run out of time.
Thank you so much, Patty.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is the simplest sentence. It is pure and simple. And indeed, those of you that are in the audience, there is nothing hidden in there. There is nothing, no extra subtext, no extra language. It is just simply, we are all equal. You know, it's just so sad that it has taken us so long, and this fight has been so long. My mother was
100 years.
My mother was born in 1920.
100 years.
All I can say, Patty, thank you. You know, Patty is an old friend of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. She is a good friend of many organizations here in Brevard County and across the state. And I want to again say we would all be standing here giving you a round of applause, Patty, for your hard work and your sacrifice, your personal sacrifice. I have been with you in venues across the state. It's seen you addressing crowds and in educating people, getting people motivated. You're an amazing person, and I thank you for what you're doing. And again, I'm going to ask you to please keep in the back of your mind an action item for our guests, our members. I know that we've got effectively a line of people now that are starting to think about raising their hands. I have a question. I've gotten at least a couple of inquiries here in the chat room. There are people that want to ask questions. People are raising their hands. And again, let me quickly remind everyone that tonight, this is the first Thursday event from the Space Coast Progressive Alliance called Florida Women, Are You Angry Yet? Our 3 speakers, Dr. Leandra Preston, Tiffany Hughes, and Patty Farley, are now going to be answering your questions. And if you would like to raise your hand, use the little reactions button, whether you're on a phone, an iPad, or on a laptop. Click the reactions and raise your hand, and then we'll call on you, give everybody a chance. This usually is a very busy time for us. So we ask you, try to keep it short, try to ask a question. We try to keep it to 3 minutes. And one of the things that I do strongly encourage is for our panelists to engage with each other. You can ask each other questions and add to somebody else's answer as well. So this is our chance for Q&A. The floor is now open. Our first question is from Shannon. Shannon, you have the floor, and all we need to do is get you unmuted. There you go. You have the floor, Shannon.
Thank you so much. It's an outstanding program, and I want to thank the panelists and you, Phil, too, for coordinating all this so wonderfully. But the question that comes to mind, at least in the history that Patty is talking about, in particular the 100 years, I think more recently, the thing that struck me is the fact that a lot of the biases, at least from what I'm observing, are among the white men. If I could just mention that, obviously we're sad that a lot of our women colleagues are not supporting us, But I was wondering if the panelists could comment on cultural differences or similarities or efforts that we might could make getting to the actionable point that one of the panelists made, Tiffany did. If there's any work that we can do, among the white, the Black, and the Hispanic men to see what we might do to perhaps understand more specifically what their viewpoints are on women's rights, and if there's anything we can do there to make some changes as we move forward as a country.
Well, thank you, Shannon. I'm going to hand it over to who wants to take this one? Is it Patty?
I'd like to say something to that. When you get out of the political realm and you start asking your normal citizens, most men, it wasn't just 96% of women, it was 96% of our populace that supports equality. Men have wives, they have mothers, they have sisters, they have daughters, and most of them want their family to have equal rights as they do. Okay? It is, in my opinion, most of it is economics, led by your better business bureaus, things like this, that put money in the hands of your politicians that are holding us back. Your average citizen wants equal rights for people. You go out on the street and you just ask them. Most people, most men, women, they support this unless there's something going on. And that when you started talking about men, it reminded me, I talked about Shafley, but one of the things that I didn't talk about was you get, gosh, I hate to say this right now, but it would be timely. The age of people here, I don't know if you remember somebody named Pat Robertson. He was a TV evangelist. Okay, he was as active in doing away with ERA as Phyllis Schlafly. He was constantly on his program talking about feminism, saying it would cause women to leave their husbands, that it caused them to practice witchcraft and become lesbians. And he was saying this in national audiences online. Now, we have to fight right now. We just got rid of Tucker Carlson, okay? But there'll be somebody that comes up that follows this person that is spreading lies, and people believe this stuff. So all we can do is try to educate. Maybe the three of us ought to take this show on the road and see what we can do. But education will help the few that misaligned and misguided. But most men want their wives and daughters and mothers to be equal, and they think that they are.
Well, Patty, I'll tell you what, let's ask Tiffany and Dr. Preston if they would like to weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, I would say create spaces for open dialogue. If we're already conducting a panel on reproductive health care, on pay equality, on the ERA, make sure that those panels also include men. So we have people in the audience, particularly men in the audience, feel like they too have a stake, that someone on that panel is speaking to them. And when we're seeing articles, I know that the Orlando Business Journal, every few weeks, honestly, has an article about pay inequality, specifically because we're talking about business, or Orlando Economic Partnership, if we're getting those types of emails from our local chambers, are highlighting those specific issues. Make sure that we're sharing it with our communities, right? You don't know what you don't know. It does take some work to get outside of your preferred circle, right? Your natural circle, and say, I want to engage in this new topic. So you do have to be intentional about sharing information and about creating space for men, for anyone, to get outside of their immediate circle and understand issues that don't necessarily or directly affect them.
And Dr. Preston, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on?
Yes, I wanted to speak to, well, I mean, what both of them had mentioned, and that is engaging men. I think it is effective when you have, other men who are allies that are willing to engage them, but also talking to men about constructs of masculinity and enabling them to see how this work really relates to them as well can be a powerful way if you have somebody who's open to having this dialogue and to bring up the issues that absolutely do affect all of us, not just women. So yeah, there are definitely a lot of different ways that we can meet men in some ways where they are, but I think really having the conversations about, how like the constructs of masculinity thing seems to give them the light bulb that many, feminists have when they first start talking about these things. So it's like their consciousness raising. And meet people where they are, that's what I really have to do. It's like you have to meet people where they are, because it's not effective if you're coming at them or if you're, speaking over them, or, I really try to respect the fact that this is where somebody is. And if they're even remotely open to learning, then I want to take this opportunity to connect with them and not, talk down in this. So I think that's really important as well.
Thank you. And by the way, the question came from Shannon Roberts, who is a past congressional candidate here on the Space Coast. And Shannon, a local community leader across the Space Coast. And she is also a past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. I was just thinking about the fact that, hey, Shannon was a president of our organization. We've had several female presidents over the 20-year history of the SCPA. And of course, we currently have a female president and vice president of the SCPA. So women are well placed in this organization in any case. Our next question comes from Nikki. Nikki, I know you've been waiting, and if you can unmute yourself, please, you have the floor.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
We can. There's a little bit of an electronic buzz that seems to be coming and going. Give it a try.
Okay, great. I wanted to try to share my video as well, so you can see me. Hi, my name is Nikki Stone, and I live in Florida now. I'm a fourth-generation Polk County resident. I'm part of the LGBT community. I consider myself gender non-conforming and non-binary. I've done a lot of research on this in terms of my spirituality. I know that transgenderism was suppressed by the British Empire with Law 377 when they took their wealth and their power and they created a massive propaganda campaign to create hate within the community. And I don't see this talked about nearly enough about what the roots of it is in terms of it being spiritual warfare. Now, as somebody, I was actually the first female wrestler in all of New England on an all-boys team. So I know a lot about what it's like going in as the non-gender on the sports team. And I fought horrifically against DeSantis about what I felt just a gender issue, that it was okay for me to be on the boys team, but it wasn't okay for the girls to be on the girls team. With a really in-depth understanding, I remember, and I'm sorry, I know I've got 3 minutes. I would try to wrap my question up, but I just want to qualify where I'm coming from with this. So, I was a very big tomboy when I was a child, and now you will never see me not in a dress or a jumpsuit. And even though I have extreme masculine energy and a protector in me that is undeniably masculine, I really see the difference between my sexual organs and my gender, which is my energy and how I present myself. So I just want to kind of ask people's feelings of, we're talking about how upsetting it is that they are restricting medicine, but what I see is a protecting, because I would be so angry right now if I was able to, if nobody was offered me therapy and had my breast removed. I would be so angry right now if somebody gave me medicine that that prevented my spiritual growth or created problems in my system. So that's one of the points that I'm trying to get people to understand, is that, you know, when we're evolving spiritually as a person, and I really do see the gender neutral and the gender transforming as people coming out as, you know, I follow the Hindu traditions of reincarnation, and that they might have been reincarnated in a different body, and they might not always stay in that energy. So I want to ask, you know, with people that are fighting for these blockers, are you aware that they are doing this without any therapy whatsoever? So we have a lot of conditioning that's happening that, as Patty mentioned, that girls must wear pink and boys must wear blue, and you know, is a lot of this driving. I mean, for me, I had this situation where my son's family literally treated me like a human traffic victim once I married him, and they wanted me to conform to gender roles to the point where I was spanked when I didn't clean the house correctly. And you know, are these gender roles that we are saying, no, I want to go out and work because I can be a protector? Is that driving a lot of this movement? And where I really come from it as a position of, I want to bring the two parties together, because I'm at the point now where no party can be trusted, and I'm looking at anarchy that I don't even want the government to govern me, because I don't feel like they're taking they're all big pharma driven. You know, it's all this like big pharma, and not actually nurturing our needs. And that brings me to the next question, which really triggered me, Leandra, when you said that this is all propaganda. My son went to one of these schools that now has pictures of girls showing their underwear to an entire room full of adults. And they used the trans photos of one of their plays 5 different times in 6 weeks on their newsletter. And I've looked very carefully into the MAP agenda, which is the minor attracted people agenda, which I believe is what is driving a lot of the trans movement that we're seeing right now. And I can tell you that my son's school sexually exploited my child in a way that I literally was screaming at them, are you enjoying this sexually? I don't understand what is going on. And a medical doctor falsified my medical form to say that I was incapacitated, and they kidnapped me and tortured me on a psychiatric ward to cover up for what I could see very clearly with what was happening, and I called them out on it. Now, fast forward that I've come here to Florida, and the police and the medical doctors have been harassing me here, because I am very aware my son's family is very high up in the World Economic Forum party, I should say, because they are a party, whether people want to admit it or not. And I've done a huge amount of research and understanding that they're trying to lower the age of consent to as young as 12.
Oh, indeed.
When you say that this is all propaganda, it is not. I know that pet play is what they use to get children to get naked. I know that they get them to lick things that they wouldn't usually lick. We have Balenciaga that has come out with their 3 ads, which had, you know, bondage children and dog leads.
Well, Nikki, I tell you what, you put an awful lot on the table for our panel right now. So I'm gonna just interrupt you real fast, and just to say thank you for being here. We're very glad that you're here, and you've reminded us that those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And you basically set up a number of questions, I think, for Dr. Preston. So Dr. Preston, would you be able to respond to Nikki?
Absolutely, and that was. I want to respond specifically to what, you know, the propaganda, because I'm not saying that children, you know, childhood sexual abuse or things like that are not real. I mean, that's absolutely independent of what I'm saying is the way that schools are being generalized to be these sites. I mean, I also have a child in public schools. It's not that it, I mean, and it's more of a school. If something like that is happening, I believe it's a problem with an individual or the school. And I mean, you know, of course, we can disagree and talk more after this meeting, but, you know, and I'm sorry that you have experienced what you have experienced. And I don't want to invalidate that. I'm not saying that that's not real. I'm saying that a lot of what is being pushed out is with the political agenda and unfounded. But I'm not saying that this doesn't ever happen. I'm not saying that your experience isn't real or valid. So I just want to make that clear. But I know there are a lot of other, you know, individuals who can speak for themselves who have had other experiences as well. You know, as my experience with my child's school, which is of course only one school. And that's, you know, so I don't want you to think I didn't mean to generalize to that extent, but in relation to what's going on with the anti-trans legislation, I don't believe it's coming from a place to protect children.
And I don't know if Tiffany or Patty would like to pitch in here. And we're going to move on. We have another question right now from Jan. Jan, you have the floor.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, 2 points. First of all, I wanted to say to Patty that, Patty, for me, you hit it a home run. Women's issues have been going on for, I mean, literally like 100 years. I mean, it's just amazing that women were not given the right to have the same education, the same treatment, the same, not even talking about payment as far as wages and salaries. I'm angry. This is something that has been bothering me for a long time, and it's not going away. And it's just amazing to me that in this day and age, we are still saying the same things. I am pissed, excuse my language, but I appreciate what you're doing. And I really wish that, you know, I mean, it goes over generations and issues. It's not just transgender and whether or not someone's gay or what it is. It's everything. Women are not being treated right. And I am angry because every male has a sister or a mother or someone in their family that's a female, and yet they're allowing this to be this way, and it's wrong. It's just terribly wrong. And I don't know what to do about it. It's got me really, really angry.
And you have a question?
No, it's just a comment that I do have a question for Leandra. Leandra, you were talking about the union members at the college and the fact that some of them are not renewing their membership. Is that because they can't afford to? Is that why you needed 60% membership in order to pass? I don't know if it's the Bill 266, but anyway, why aren't the members of your union not renewing their membership?
So typically, historically, it's been that the people are represented by the union, whether or not they pay the dues. So, I mean, before that, we were at, you know, for decertified, it means basically if we don't get 60% membership, we're not going to have our union anymore. So there are various reasons. Unfortunately, several years ago, we had a really poor leadership that did cause us to lose some people. I believe we've gotten a lot of them back. But for the most part, it's just a lack of understanding or even knowing or realizing how much the union does, taking things for granted and not, you know, being involved in that sense of what we do. And it's just, unfortunately, a lot of it's just lack of awareness. And so that's what we've been doing, a big push for trying to get everybody to talk to everybody. And, you know, a lot of it is divided by, I mean, you see it, you know, there's 90% union membership in certain departments and there's, 10% in others. A lot of it is unfortunately very political as well.
And I think our own Karen Houston probably could add to this because she's a expert in the field. Karen, can you help answer Jan's question?
Absolutely. I was just listening to Leandra, and I'm the field staff here for the Central Labor Council. So I know our UFF president, I know Brevard Federation of Teachers, I know all of these people and the different union leadership. And we've been having summits. Matter of fact, I may consider inviting you to one with the leadership recently, because they're the 1445 and the 256 and all those horrible bills that came up this session. It's really about public education. They want to break it down, and everybody forgot to bring up the voucher issues too, because they want to take this money and share it with people who are wealthy and whatever else, and send the money out to anybody. Can just say I'm homeschooling and get that money and do what they want to do. It lessening the money that goes to public education. It's so much that happened this year. It's so much, and you ladies have touched on a great deal of it. And I was glad to see you, Leandra, the fact that you're with UFF and you brought out a whole lot of that stuff. But there's so much more. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, really. Some of the things that you all have brought out. It's just too numerous to mention everything. But I kind of wrote a quick list of education. Number one, unions. Get rid of the unions, because we talk about what's happening, and we engage people, and we get them activated. That's why they want to get rid of unions. Reproductive rights, race, immigration. That's another one that they're messing with. LGBTQ. They want to preempt everything. Take control from the state and take the local control away. That's some of the bills we've tried to fight back this year. Gun control. Why nobody, gun control. School boards. They want to control the school boards as well as the county commissions, as well as all the. If they put a dime toward anything, they want to control it. That's what's happening in our state legislature this year. And ordinances. I was talking to our resident city councilman here with SCPA about ordinances. They could go away if your city or your county put together an ordinance that one person, one business owner can say, you know what, this is interrupting my business, it's causing me to lose money, and sue about that, and those ordinances will go away. So these are the kind of things that's happening in our capital, and it's just one business owner. That's all it takes. It doesn't matter if 500,000 people will be affected by that ordinance. It just means that I say that's bothering me, and I'm going to file a suit, which could take 2 years. In the meantime, that ordinance cannot be enacted. It will stop. Whatever the provisions of that ordinance is, it will be null and void for the moment until that's over. And so as Tiffany said something about all the different it requires us to do this and requires us to do that. It requires us to get out and vote and get people to vote and get these people out of office, not because they're Republican or Democrat, because they're doing things that are hurting our community. And I didn't want to get on the soapbox, Phil, that you got me. But I'm just so frustrated. I mean, what about human trafficking? What about insurance problems that we're having? What about affordable housing? Why haven't they attacked all those things? This is kind of stuff we're talking about. Take care of us and stop telling, oh God, getting people fired up with this crazy propaganda stuff and making them believe all this crap that they're saying is real, and taking away things that we've fought so hard to get. This is just ridiculous. So I know the ladies all have something to say about what your action items are. My action item for everybody is get out the vote, take 10 people with you, and talk to people from if whatever side you're on. Don't be afraid to talk to people from all sides, because I don't believe that everybody in every political division believes everything that's happening or agrees with everything that's happening. So I'm sorry, I feel like I took a little too long.
That's okay. And I'll tell you, so Karen, you threw out a whole bunch of questions onto the floor, so raised some interesting ideas. I think did you answer Jan's question? Jan, do you feel that you had your question answered about?
Pretty much. I want to mention that Sarah has her hand up.
Yes. I was trying to say that next.
Sarah, Sarah, we're not going to forget you, but I want to make sure, Jan, you were asking about the question.
Pretty much.
How it is that a union would be deactivated if it didn't have an adequate percentage of members.
I mean, I was wondering if you had enough people that paid for their membership so you could get up to 60%. Would that make a difference? But sounds like that's not an issue.
And it's 1%. That's what it costs, really, at 1% of their salary. And the issue is also now what they're also doing is we could take it out of our paycheck, they would deduct it. Now they disallowed that as well. So now we have to move every person who's already a member to a self-pay or a different pay system, which we've been working on. But, it's just all these additional, it's like, an additional barrier. Let's make it more difficult. It's by design. And unfortunately, we don't have the, union enthusiasm at the university right now. Now, I will say some, like FAU's got a very strong membership. So, we're like, what are you doing that we need to do? It's also how much threat are you under, like, Randy Fine's coming, we better get everybody now because we are facing this, because this bill passed, people are becoming more engaged. We are, I think, at 38%, but it's, we have a long way to go. So.
And it's already a right to work state. So these people have been riding along with us all this time. We've been paying dues. Those of us who pay dues, we've been paying dues all these years. And all of a sudden, they come up with these things because I think they are kind of know that not every person in that unit or on that job is within the union. And so if they already know that,
Forgive me for interrupting you. And Sarah, I'm going to ask you to wait just a few moments longer. Is that okay? Because we have a special guest who has just entered the floor. I shouldn't say doctor yet. Ana Escamani, who is our state representative from Central Florida, from Orange County and that area. I was going to say the 47th district, but I get confused. 47th and 42nd right now. Ana, if you're here, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you loud and clear. Hi, everyone.
It's wonderful to have you. We are so proud to have you and honored, and I know that your time is extremely precious. So I'm going to ask you to please give us a report on what you've seen and what your thoughts are with regard to our case of Florida women. Are you angry yet? Please, you have the floor.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, y'all, for having me. It's such a pleasure to always be with our Space Coast Progressive Alliance. I see Dr. Leandra Preston here, who is one of my professors at UCF, alongside, of course, Miss Tiffany Hughes, and so many amazing badass women like Vicki. And I think I see Patty Farley too. So yeah, it's a full house of rock stars. And we are approaching what will be the very end of the most horrifying legislative session of my history in Florida, especially my 5 years of being in the legislature. Today, the Florida House passed once more the gender affirming care ban, which was revised by the Senate to be a little less harsh, but still incredibly harsh, banning gender affirming care for any new trans youth patient, and requiring that gender affirming care only be provided by doctors, which means if you're someone who has a practitioner who's a nurse, you're going to have to find a new provider, alongside so many other restrictions that specifically target LGBTQ plus people. And then, of course, in the face of abortion access, we know that we are waiting for a Supreme Court decision on the 15-week ban, which could then trigger the 6-week ban. And so I'm definitely angry. We also had House Bill 999, Senate Bill 266, which is the big attack on higher education and academic freedom. But I will say that my love for humanity and my hope for the future far exceeds whatever anger I have. And that's what motivates me to get up every day, to deal with the trolls on the internet, to, keep my focus clear and not get distracted by a lot of this bullshit, for lack of a better word. I mean, it's frustrating because I think so many of the Republican tactics, it's grounded in creating chaos for the hope that it distracts people from actually realizing why they can't afford rent, why their property insurance is too high, why there are health disparities, why our Black mamas are much more likely to die in a pregnancy compared to others. Instead of addressing these problems, these inequities, we pretend like the word inequity doesn't exist, right? We don't want to collect data. We don't want to talk about history because it's easier to ignore than actually address the consequences, of past policymakers and of broken systems. And so I come to you, with a heavy but full heart, because I'm very hopeful for the future of our state, that people will wake up, will start showing up, help us get this message out and be a part of the solution versus just complain at home because that's not good enough. We have to have folks show up to help. And so with that, I'm happy to grab a few questions if folks have it. Like I said, tomorrow literally is the last day of legislative session. All we're doing tomorrow is voting on the tax package, which I will say I was able to secure what will be a permanent tax break on old children's diapers and adult incontinence products. So that was one achievement that our team was able to accomplish. And we're also voting on the state budget tomorrow and the conforming bills. And then after that, it'll be sine die, and then we wait for the governor to sign things into law. And of course, litigation, as many of these policies I already described are absolutely unconstitutional. And I do suspect there to be many lawsuits. And the DeSantis administration expects that too, because there are multiple line items in the state budget for litigation. And so they're expecting it as well. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars, but the fact that they're expecting it means that they know there are risks associated with what they're doing. And so that should give us confidence to continue.
Anna, thank you so much. We appreciate the report and we appreciate your being there. I know how incredibly difficult this is for you. And we thank you. Thank you so much for your commitment. Thank you for your hard work, your intelligent discourse, your representation. We so wish that you were here in the Space Coast for us. On the other hand, we're just glad that you're there in the house. We actually had a question that's waiting. Sarah had a question, and I don't know, Sarah, if you would like to ask your question of Anna, or if you want to ask it of one of the other members of our panel.
Sure.
Sarah, if you could unmute yourself.
Yeah. So I'm actually the mom. I'm a trans mom. And they're at UCF, so they are older.
Right.
But I know that they will be impacted. Their doctor has already told them that they will be impacted. Sorry, I didn't try to cry.
No, it's okay, Sarah.
I'm so worried about them. And I guess my question is, like, I know how I can support them as a parent, but I don't know that they're even prepared for maybe some things that
Hey, you're not alone, Sarah. It's really important for you to know that there is an entire community standing behind you. We will answer your questions as best we can, and we will support you in any way that we can. You have the floor, and you have a whole team of people who might be able to answer your questions. Who would like to respond to Sarah's thoughts?
I mean, I like to grab it real quick if I can. First of all, Sarah, just 100%, as Phil said, you're not alone. And we are united as the Democratic Caucus in fighting back against all of the transphobic policies. And despite our small numbers, I will say we have been united. We have not seen any type of, in the past, we would have Democrats that would side with Republicans on some of these type of issues, and it has not happened. It's been a really united front to defend trans kids, to defend LGBTQ plus community members, and that's not going to stop. Now, of course, I will say this bill, Senate Bill 254, is incredibly damaging. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And it reminds me of many of the same tactics that have been used to ban abortion. Very similar tactics, disinformation, right? Calling abortion sensational terms, using language and rhetoric that's emotionally driven, calling medication abortion chemical abortion. Same tactics have been used to demonize gender affirming care, to demonize those that provide gender affirming care, to lift up stories of the so-called detransitioners. Anti-abortion people do the same thing when they lift up stories of people who regret their abortions, right? So I share that because it's a playbook that we've seen. And obviously it's much more complicated for people who identify as trans or gender nonconforming, because with an abortion, if a state bans abortion, we all know the consequences. And I'm sure, that was talked about before I hopped on, but you need gender affirming care, every day of your life, right? An abortion is a procedure. You have to travel out of state. It's definitely a barrier. It's going to be difficult, but it's much more complicated when you need medicine to live, right? So something that we've been focused on right now proactively is actually creating support systems like abortion funds to support people who are in need of HRT or puberty blockers or mental counseling support, you name it. We're helping to build out that network because we understand just the consequences of someone not being able to access the care they need to be healthy, safe, and strong. And the only option at that point is to leave the state of Florida, which many people are already doing. We know that. I have had multiple people send me their GoFundMes because they're raising money to leave Florida. I also want you to know that this policy in particular, alongside the Board of Medicine's banning on gender-affirming care access for young people, are highly unconstitutional. And we've already seen other cases where courts have stopped implementation of certain policies. And so I'm very hopeful that we'll have, some legal fight that will yield positive results. But the interim, knowledge is power. And I will say there's been a lot of disinformation out there, even among well-meaning people. There's been disinformation out there. And so right now I'm working with attorneys on an explanation of what this bill does and doesn't do. For example, there's nothing in this bill that will investigate or remove children from supportive parents. That's not in this bill. What is in this bill is language around custody between divorcees. And there is language around, changes of custody, timeshare, and if one parent doesn't support gender-affirming care, compare to the other. But there's nothing where a state would come in and take away your child. So it's really important for us to not create unnecessary anxiety because it already is so much. So part of my hope too is to let's stick to the facts. We already know it's bad. We don't have to make it worse. And then from there, we figure out how to navigate. For many of our providers that do not have doctors on staff, we're trying to see about MOUs. Is there a doctor that could, be in relationship with a local nonprofit that can do the prescription? So we're trying to get creative with finding ways to navigate this environment. There are no easy answers. I will say, another part of this bill that really sucks is its implementation date is upon signature. Usually it's July 1st. This will go into effect the second the governor signs it. So that creates an even deeper sense of urgency than I think on most policy issues. But with that, I just want you to know that we're not giving up, we're not stopping. And I don't think they're stopping, right? It's also important for us to remember, they're not done. I mean, it took them 50 years to overturn Roe. They know the long-term strategy, and we got to fight at that same way. So we're not only thinking ahead around the interim, how to make sure people have access to care right now in the situation that we're in, but then what are we doing to think long-term in fighting back and restoring our rights? And so just want to say thank you. Thank you for being an affirming mom. I'm so honored to connect with you. And of course, if your kid needs anything, especially at UCF, definitely let me know.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sarah, I don't think you could have gotten a better answer to your question. Although I would like to invite both Dr. Preston and Tiffany, if you'd like to add anything.
I wanted to say that I appreciate and respect you sharing your pain and what you're going through, because this is the reality of this kind of legislation. There are families, there are people who are deeply affected by this, and it doesn't just affect the individual, it affects a lot more people in the community. So I appreciate you sharing that. And, we can talk more after the panel as well. And,
And Tiffany, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, Sarah, I put a little note in the chat, but I think Rep. Eshkamani really summed up what services we have and how we're going to continue to fight forward. But thank you for being a mom who's supporting your child in every single way. I think this fight is really so that parents can support their children. We like to say this is parental rights, but this is the greatest example of parental rights. Right? Being able to support your child in every way, shape, or form. So know that we are standing behind you and beside you as we all continue to fight forward.
And it is important for everyone, as we've said before, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And that remember that when our nation started and our founding fathers used wonderful words and wonderful phrases that, all men are created equal, et cetera, that it wasn't until 1920 that we passed the right for women to vote. It is a long and arduous process. The arc of justice is long, or the arc of history is long, but it tends to curve toward justice, as I recall, paraphrasing Dr. King. The essence is being focused on the long haul, I think, is so important. We do have a quick question from Shannon on the chat to Patty, and she was wondering, what was the gender diversity composition of the 48 senators opposing the ERA in the April of 2023 vote? Is what her question was.
Yeah,
do you know?
I answered Shannon. I didn't count, but I do know, well, they were mainly male. It was the people that voted against it were all Republicans. Murkowski and Collins, that was 2 Republican senators that voted for it. Off the top of my head, I know Joni Ernst and Shelley Capito voted against it. So that was 2 women, Republican women that voted against it. They all go, I'll go down the list of Republicans and do a count, but that's what we had here. The people that voted against it was 47, all Republicans.
We are now in a position where it's about time for us to start rounding things up. I know that Anna Eskamani's time is precious and she's going to need to go shortly. Anna, if you would like to take this quick opportunity to give us a quick closing thought, your closing ideas, and then we're going to get some action items from our panelists, and then we'll close the evening. Anna, you have the floor.
Well, first of all, thanks y'all for letting me hop in near the end, and sorry for my delay. We just got back from the Capitol and are actually in the process of also packing because we got to hit the road as soon as we're off the House floor tomorrow. And my call to action is just, we got to keep going. We can't slow down. We can't stop. We cannot look back, and we need to also protect one another. We're all we have, and it's really important to assume best intentions, among our peers. Not every person is going to completely understand what we're going through. And I often find that, we talk about this in the Democratic Caucus, like we're most hard on each other than we are with our opponents at times. And just to kind of remember, who are your allies? Like who's with you, so we can work together to hold the line, to push back, and to win, to build power, to protect our communities, to secure not only our rights, but collective liberation for everyone. And part of that is also self-care and experiencing joy. Joy is radical right now, and there's so much despair, but we also can't forget to take care of ourselves because we need to survive this work. We're not going to survive if we're just constantly in a place of stress and despair. So whatever your outlet is, also find that too, because you need that in order to have longevity in this work. And so with that, I appreciate y'all, and let's keep up the fight.
Thank you so much, Anna. And by the way, one last quick question. I think you were just as close to getting a PhD. Is that already complete? I can't remember.
Not yet. My hope is to enter dissertation next semester and then finish the semester after that. So within a year.
One of these days, we'll be calling you Dr. Eskamani. I'm sure of it. You're an amazing woman. Thank you so much. Again, as whenever you visit us, you know that we always like to give you a standing ovation. Our heart goes out to you. Thank you for all of your courage. Everybody in this room is giving you a round of applause right now. Trust me. So take a nice deep breath. We hope that you get a decent night's sleep and a safe journey home tomorrow. Thank you for all that you do for us. And we're so honored to have you here visiting with us. Thank you, Anna. We love you. See you later, alligator. Now let me take it back to our chat. I see that Nellie Cardinal reminds all of us that the YouTube video will be online about an hour, maybe a little later after this program is done, and it's available at our YouTube channel. That's www.youtube.com/SCPA Brevard. So if you missed some of it, you missed a highlight, or you came into the middle of the program and like to see the whole program, go check us out on YouTube. This is an opportunity for us quickly to go to our 3 panelists, and I'm going to start right at the top and ask them about maybe a quick closer and what your action item might be. Dr. Preston, please.
Okay, well, I wanted to say I don't think I got to thank the other panelists for all of the work that you do, and it's such incredible work. And Patricia, I have been, a fan. I know the work you do. I see you when you go to the House. I saw you speaking truth to power, and I just appreciate what everyone here does, because I know if you're here, you're doing important work. So I wanted to actually, one of my possible action items was to follow Anna Eskamani on any social media you're on, because there's so much, she really keeps you up to date on a lot of policy. And, I don't know, you may already be, but if you're not, you should definitely follow Representative Anna Eskamani and, continue educating and talking to your, immediate communities about what is going on. They have to know the narrative has to shift to the truth, that it's really just been so polluted. Oh, well, he's great. This is like, we have to help people understand, that we have a literal fascist taking over our state. And if you are an employee anywhere where you have a union at any public place, I strongly encourage you, because that union bill doesn't only affect education and higher education, it affects all of these, public institutions. So I strongly encourage you to join your union. So thank you all very much for this opportunity. I really do appreciate this.
I'm sorry, I was talking without unmuting. Thank you so much, Dr. Preston. Moving on to Tiffany very quickly. Do you have a quick wrap up and an action item or two for our members and our audience, please?
Absolutely, Phil. Thank you so much to the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance for hosting this event this evening. Such wonderful conversation. I said this during my time, and I'll say this again. Do get angry, but make sure to get activated. Remember that the players will change, the governor will change, the legislature will change, but the lasting effects of those policies will remain. So make sure that you are keeping yourself educated, keep fighting, make sure that you are leaning into your legislators, both to get information and to get on them about how they are voting and what needs to change with how they vote. And make sure to get to the ballot box. Most importantly, make sure to get yourself and a friend, take someone with you to the ballot box. Thank you.
Great words of wisdom. Patty Farley, you get to close the panel. And what are your closing thoughts?
Okay.
And
first, it was an honor tonight to be on with these other two dynamic women. And I'm going to say several things, and I'll try to do it fast for you if you're running out of time. Join the NAACP, join the Democratic Women's Club, take Dr. Preston's classes if you can. If you're here, make sure that you've paid your dues to the Spacecoast Progressive Alliance. Lead, educate, persist. I'm going to put a sign for ERA. Chuck Schumer and a group started another petition the day that they said that they announced in the press conference that they were taking the vote to the floor. And we're trying to get as many signatures for this as possible. He has promised that he will bring it up again this next session. And even though Rubio and Scott will give you a hard time, call their office and ask them, tell them that you want them to support equal rights. Ask them why they're not. Okay? Why would any U.S. senator not support equality? We are the only, I have to throw this in, we are the only democracy on the face of the earth that doesn't have an ERA. Okay? We are the only industrialized nation that doesn't have an ERA. This is shameful, people. And ERA would correct so many of our problems that we have. It would bring so many children out of poverty. Anyhow, that's my stick.
Thank you so much, Patty. And I want to
call him Patty.
I'll tell you what, it is so many people. When you casually mention this to anybody, there's so many people that just don't understand that the ERA is alive and can pass, and it can pass quickly. So to everybody, to all three of our, first let me quickly remind everybody of our action items. We've all heard our great action items. The program must not end here. If we all just turn off the computer and say we've had a wonderful night, then we have failed. So please take action, do something, be motivated. Remember that our next First Thursday program on Thursday, June 1st, will be called Policing the Police here in Brevard County. That has some very special meanings. You're not going to want to miss that program. Again, the first Thursday of June. And if we can unmute everyone and say, let us give our panel a round of applause and to say thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful.
A beautiful.
Share this video.
Indeed, share the video. It's available. It will be available very shortly up on our YouTube channel. So if people have missed it, pass it around. This is a discussion that everybody, man or woman, or anyone in between, we all need to hear, to understand, to think. There were some fantastic questions, fantastic panelists. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thanks to all of
you. Thank you.
Thanks to all of our guests, all of our members that are here tonight. We will say good night. We'll look forward to seeing you on Thursday, June 1st for Policing the Police. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
May the 4th be with you.
That's right.
May the 4th be with you. Have a beautiful night, everyone.
Good night.
Okay.